West Des Moines has very, very few really important historical sites. But that Jordan House really matters. It played such a vibrant and important role during the Underground Railroad and helping African Americans and blacks navigate their way from the South to the North. And it's got to be, Jordan, the name's got to be more than a mall. It's got to be more than a street. It's the Jordan House. And I caught wind the fact that they were going to build a 3-story warehouse that was going to be just a massive building on that corner that would have absolutely cast a shadow all the way across the Jordan House. And myself and another person, Don Shane, who's in West Des Moines, and myself got together, made a significant financial contribution to buy the property and donate it to the city. And then we've been working on knocking down buildings, putting up the parking lot, and giving the Jordan House its proper respect in the community for being such a historical building. So that one was personal to me, that we did that. And the city has been remarkable. Tom Haddon and crew and the mayor, Russ Trimble, have just been super. Second thing I wanted to tell you was I'm going through therapy as we speak. Because as a retiring CEO, there's certain things you just don't like the optics of. One of those is ever being out in the public during the middle of the day. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this guy runs a Fortune 500 company. Why is he at Costco? Why is he at the bank? Why is he at Hy-Vee? So I literally have this in the back of my mind every time I walk through. Even still to this day, I struggle with it. And I've been retired almost a year from that previous role. And then you find out, it's Dan Houston, chairman of the board, chief executive officer, principal financial group, and his wife, Joni. Now I'm in her backyard. And so just this morning, I go to the bank right down here and to cash some checks, to get a little cash for tips and all that stuff. And I walk into the bank, and it's not an insignificant amount of money. And I said, do you need my driver's license? And she says, oh no, we know that you're Joni's husband. And I'm a rookie because I don't go into retail shops. I just don't. So I picked up what I thought was the 1 point set. I go up to the counter. That's all I'm getting. And I want to get in and get out. And he says, those are packages of 4, not just 1. I said, for $20 you get 4? He says, yeah. He says, Joni would know that. He says, he did. Joni would know that, and I know you're her husband. So then, just to sort of cap it all off, I have one of my administrative assistants retiring. She's a big fan of Wizard of Oz, and I got her this poster that I needed to get a frame. So I go into Hobby Lobby to get this poster. I mean, of all the places I don't want to be caught in, Hobby Lobby, right? At 10 o'clock in the morning, I walk in there and I'm thinking, I got in, I got out, I didn't see anybody. Now I walk up to the checkout. Who is it? It's our pilot's wife. Dan, what are you doing here? Where's Joni? So I'm going through therapy on getting humbled about being in her space. And the last sort of thing that I'm having to sort out, this is not one I'm not proud of this, but it's just a fact. I'd never made an airline reservation or a car rental reservation. I've always had Mary or Danielle be able to do that for me. So one of my first lessons this past year has been learning how to make airline reservations, and God forbid if I get the wrong date. So anyway, enough of sort of that. One other, I just call out Katie here. Capital Crossroads is something that is near and dear to my heart. And when you looked at Catherine's quote about standing on the shoulders of giants, one of my favorites is a Chinese proverb, when you drink from the well, remember the men and the women that dug the well. And all of us are in this room because more than likely someone along your career took an interest in you and helped you along in your respective path to success. And oftentimes when you ask people who is the most influential person beyond parents and grandparents and faculty, it's their first boss. And I think that is something that you really have to reflect on when you are their first boss. They're out of college and they're new and they're green and they need your counsel, your patience, your empathy to help them become their best self. Because it'll either be a lousy experience or it'll be a great experience. But it's not on them. It's on you. You're the one that is going to mold this person into the person that they're ultimately going to become in their business world. And I think it's probably more important today than ever, especially with this nonsense of hybrid work, because I despise it, I hate it, I don't recommend it. And I think it's going to cause more damage than good before we're all done. Katie and I work on Capital Crossroads, and it's one of the tougher initiatives you can undergo because it's not just planning for the quarter or the year. We're trying to go out to the next couple of decades. What has to happen in the next couple of decades in the Des Moines metro area to put it on the path to prosperity? And other men and women before us have done a hell of a job getting us to where we're at today, because we do have, for a city of Des Moines size, a really good infrastructure. The building of that airport, it matters. $550 million is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, because over the course of the next 50 years, that becomes the point of embarkment for people coming to the area. That was the saddest airport. It was an excuse of an airport, and it was long overdue. And we'll spend the next 10 to 15 years finishing that off. It isn't really around the infrastructure, the way that you typically think about science centers and ballparks and soccer fields. It's around housing, it's around food security, it's around creating an affordable environment for people to engage in this community and be part of the community and to be able to afford the community. The good news is our land on a relative basis is cheap, housing relatively cheap. We've got good jobs, and so we've got a lot of the strong fundamentals there, but those become really, really important building blocks to a strong and vibrant community. I want to take just a few minutes and talk about succession. Looking around the room, there's probably a few of you that are contemplating succession, and those of you who are going to be the successors, it's also something for you to maybe keep in mind a little bit. I, as Catherine had said, been with the company for 41 and a half years. I counted up and I kept one business card from every title that I had or the change of the name, and there's a couple of them that are in Chinese and Japanese. I have 24 over a 41-year period of time. Some people might say he just couldn't hold the job. That's one way to probably look at it. But succession. When I became the CEO, the very first day, the very first meeting, the question of me was, who's on your successor list? I thought, what the hell? First day into the role, and my board's asking me about succession. And for any of you who have gone through a good succession, you know what that feels like. For those of you who've gone through a bad succession, you know what that looks like as well. So I wanted to take just a few minutes and talk about what I thought was most important as we identified the next CEO to run the Principal Financial Group, which again is a very large Fortune 250 organization that does business in 80 different countries. We have custody and assets under management of $1.6 trillion with 68 million customers. So whoever's going to take over, it really, really matters. But frankly, it wouldn't make any difference. I was mentoring a young man yesterday. He's 25 years. He just became president of a company. They have 180 employees. His challenges are no different than mine. They really are. There's some, you add zeros, but in many ways, attracting and retaining talent, anchoring against the values of a family-owned business in this particular case. What are his core values? What was his predecessor's core values? And what are the tenets of the organization? The toughest thing to do is to recognize you have to have both internal and external candidates. Boards, particularly of publicly traded companies, demand it. They will make up the excuse that it's for fiduciary liability purposes. I don't buy it. I think you do it because you just need to make sure that you've exhausted any and all possibilities, because it's a job of one. It's a one-on-one. That's all there is, right? It's just going to be that person. So we had an international search. We looked hard in Europe. We looked in Latin America. We looked in the U.S. The person who came out on top was Deanna Strable, who had been my chief financial officer for the last 7 years and has been with the company for 35 years. She absolutely stood shoulder to shoulder in terms of her capabilities with every other single external candidate and other internal candidates. But one of the things that she could do that I think is critically important, she's a culture carrier. The things that Catherine described around core values, ethics, morals, in creating a healthy environment for people to come work for the company, she has all that in spades. Having said that, if I looked at all of my direct reports, 60% of them were recruited from outside the company. But that top job, if you don't think that thing doesn't matter, that cascades all the way down through the organization. It permeates all the way down through the organization. So a culture carrier was incredibly important. Yeah, you got to be smart. Yeah, you got to be comfortable dealing with investors and customers, as well as intermediaries, the people who, in large part, sell our products and services. But that is a really important process. Now you've made the decision, okay? You might ask the question, and I think some people around there thought, well, you just turn over the keys. It's a year-long process, well documented. All the customers we would visit, we went around the globe twice, literally twice, because we have operations in so many different locations. For example, 3,000 employees in India. Every single employee we were in front of. That was the bottom line. If it wasn't in person, it was done virtually. The top 25 clients, we are there together, sitting down with those clients. All the top distribution intermediary partners that we have, the Gallaghers, Aon, Mercer, these kinds of organizations. Once again, we both went more than once to those organizations. And then investors. At the end of the day, it's funny, when you travel internationally, like in India, they would think that I personally own the company. If I did, I wouldn't have waited this long to retire. I am the largest individual shareholder, but my share is less than 1% of the entire company. And the reason I state that is it goes along with being the CEO. Deanna is also going to be a large shareholder of the company. But guess what? I don't own the company. The shareholders own the company. They just hired me and now Deanna to represent their interest in the company. So the top 25 investors, we went around the world to sit down with them. Who are they? Nippon Life Insurance out of Japan, the Kuwait Investment Authority, KIA. We went to Dubai. Sovereign wealth funds are large owners of a lot of companies. But again, that is something that is critically important because they want to know, is something going to change in a dramatic way? The stock price on the day we made the announcement, here's the really critical test. If it goes way up, what to tell you? Dan sucked. If the price goes way down, what's it mean? Deanna sucks. If it stays about the same or just goes up 35 cents, what's it mean? Continuity. Continuity. No other financial information was shared. No other announcements were made. We said that we would announce her replacement within 6 months, who would be the next CFO. So again, we went through that process. Our employees have really witnessed what I would call a very, very well thought out, well planned, orchestrated handoff of leadership. People didn't leave at the C level. Employees sort of understood over the course of that last year while we were still at the helm. And I still maintain an office there and probably will for the foreseeable future. I don't type, so I need a lot of support. And I don't type. I hate to type. I have dictated every bit of my correspondence, all my emails are dictated. And I've got a group of people that sort through that. Katie knows that. Yeah, I have a whole list of first. I'd never started a Zoom meeting. I'd never made an airline reservation or car reservation or hotel reservation. I'd never not ever had an office. I've never not had a full-time administrative assistant to support me. Yeah, all sorts of first things that Dan's trying to sort out, and everyone is making great fun of me as I try to work my way through that. So I just thought I'd plant that seed on succession, and I'm happy to field questions for those of you who are contemplating that and working your way through it. The second topic I wanted to hit on was servant leadership. Anybody hear about it, read about it? Anybody sort of know the father of servant leadership? Anybody? Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker, and if you get a chance, if you do any business reading, and I don't do any fictional reading at all, but I really enjoy biographies. I love history, but in particular, business management books. I think the last thing we should have in any university is a degree in management. I really do. I think it's the stupidest degree you could possibly have. Because at the end of the day, you have to have some strong capability skill set on what you do, whatever it is. But it's probably not management coming out of college. And you're probably not going to learn management at college. You can learn some of the fundamentals. But for me, when I think about servant leadership, every one of my direct reports know this. I discriminate every single day because I treat every single person differently, but I treat them all fairly. That's the key. Because I've never asked anyone to ever adapt to the way I work. It's their choice, and I'll adapt to them. And some people hear that and say, well, I can't wait to ask one of your direct reports. Ask any one of them, because they'll tell you he's incredibly flexible in how he works with me. And it's my job to understand what is the best way to motivate those individuals to do their best job for the company. That's my sole job. And I can't do that unless I know them personally. And I know every one of my employees' spouses, their kids, their grandkids. I know their backgrounds, where they're from, what their interests are. And I know that in some of their lives, it gets complicated, okay? Because it does. Stuff happens, right? Kids get in trouble, kids get in drugs, go through divorces, there's death in the family, dogs, grandparents, parents, all those issues. It all matters. It matters greatly to those individuals that you have empathy and care about what they're going through at any given time, without getting too far into their lunch bucket. One of the things the HR department is probably most happy about my retirement is I've never in the history of my roles as a leader have used the company's annual performance review materials. Never once. I've never used it. I've used the same model every year my entire career after becoming a leader when I was 28 years old. Here's the 5 things I think you're doing really well. Here's the 5 things I don't think you're doing very well. It's always 5 and 5. It's not 4 and 5. It's not 5 and 0 or 0 and 5. Here's 2 ideas I have for you as it relates to your development, but I'm not in charge of your development. You tell me what you're going to do. These are some things I might suggest you pursue. All the people that were in Larry's direct report when I took over from Larry Zippelman, who, by the way, is an amazing leader and made a significant contribution to Drake University, now has his name on the business school there. Every one of his direct reports knew that that's how I operated. And then one person in particular, she just found that the most ridiculous thing in the world, because she didn't think she had 5 things that she needed to work on. I did. And I think it's really unfair when you start thinking about, because you're not helping employees to say, hey, Katie, you just do all these things so great, and I don't give you any work to do relative to your ongoing development. I'm a desperate need of continued improvement. We all are, in many, many ways. Deanna, one of the very first things that she did is a mandatory 20-hour program on just AI. Every employee at all levels. Some of it's basic understanding, how's it work, trying it, experimenting it, using it. I know that there's companies that aren't allowing it to be used at the work site because you could get false readings, etc., and all that. You don't think we don't get bad information off Google today? I mean, I don't think they cornered the market on truth, right? I mean, the reality is we don't use it to interface with customers directly, but in terms of accounts payable and accounts receivable and processing and these sorts of things, when you're blockchain is really important. And no doubt blockchain is going to give us the framework just like the search engine did, right? So you had the internet, the search engine is what was laid out over the top, and that's where the value of the internet came from. Blockchain will serve as that fundamental ledger that allows AI to really, really exploit that in a significant way. So that was maybe, and happy to sort of field any further questions on that. And then maybe last one, so servant leadership, the succession is important. People often wonder, how do you get to where you're at today, Dan? I mean, that's one of the questions that maybe pops up. My dad was an executive with Coca-Cola. One of the things he told me when I graduated from college was, Dan, you can go into a management trainee program and maybe in 10 years someone might notice who you are. If you join whatever the organization is, the sales or the consulting organization of the company, and you go out and see who those customers are, that's another way to do that. So even though my background was in finance, I started in consulting and sales through intermediaries down in Texas. Now, the funny part of that story is, now I'm going back to 1984, the oil, anybody watching Landman? Is it not great? Love it. That's Odessa, and that's Midland, and that's where I started my career. And all that nonsense you see, it's real. That is what that place looks like on steroids. But anyway, I was interviewing for the job in Dallas, and I'm thinking, hey, go to Dallas. I grew up in Houston, so now I'm in Dallas, and Dallas is a big opportunity. First day of work, May the 28th, 1984, sit down with Chad Sims in his office, and he says, hey, Dan, just one other detail. He says, I've got Dallas. I handle Dallas. Now, you, well, before I get to you, Rob Hill, the other person in the office, he handles East Texas and Fort Worth. Anyone who knows their geography knows that Dallas is in the middle. So he got both halves on the sides of Dallas. What you have, Dan, is you got West Texas. And so you get Lubbock, Amarillo, Muleshoe, Abilene, Midland, and Odessa. That's a really small area to go out and do pension consulting out to these businesses. And it was absolutely wonderful. My first broker was Howard Bethel. I was asked to go back many, many years later and eulogize him at his funeral. He and I became lifelong friends, and I have many friendships out there. I would say this: if you can make it in Midland, you can make it anywhere, right? You're going to be okay. But the real point of this is employees, I don't care if they're an actuary, investment managers, accountants, having them understand who the customer is, who the intermediaries are, and how you win a piece of business or how you lose a piece of business, to me is one of the most important things you can possibly do. Either having them do the ride-alongs, but getting them exposure to how hard it is to win a piece of business, because it's hard. It really is hard. Even if you're not in direct sales, even if it's indirect through an intermediary, understanding what that intermediary's criteria are. If you're going to have an investment capability and put that on Amanda's platform for an investment option, the data is going to prove it out. Either you're really good top quartile performance over a 3, 5, and 10-year period of time that can be additive to those customers, or it's not. And so what's your differentiator relative? Is it commercial real estate? Is it private equity? Is it private debt? Is it domestic equities, international equities? Whatever it is. But your job is to truly understand that. So when finally sort of someone buys it and someone's processing that on the inside, I think they oftentimes take it for granted. Well, it just showed up. Someone mailed it over the transom. Couldn't be further from the truth. It is a really tough task to source new business back into any, I don't care which company you're with, but understanding that connective tissue between the development of those relationships that ultimately turns into a customer, retail or third party, is critically important. So maybe I'll just pause there and field questions. I am an anti-PowerPoint person. I don't like set presentations. I don't like questions in advance because I think it becomes my responsibility to respond to your questions on a direct basis as you react to the information shared. So,
do you think there's anything specifically? I run a landscape business, so I work with a lot of blue collar folks out in the field. Is there anything that Des Moines can do specifically to attract more blue collar talent?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One of the projects I worked on with Governor Reynolds when she was Lieutenant Governor was Future Ready Iowa. And as much time that has been spent on STEM and STEAM, which I don't like the whole STEAM thing. I just don't put arts in the same category as math, science, and technology and math and engineering. I just don't. I'm not an anti-art person, but at the end of the day, we got to get some serious work done. Period. End of statement. So part of that was around internships and mentorships, programs out there, and working with the trades. So we went to like Pella High School and worked on that, a program to help knit Pella roller screen and Vermeer back to the high school, and a welding program. The tech school here is definitely into it. I think Waukee and West Des Moines now are doubling down and building out some of their trades capabilities. And landscaping, here's the reality. It's become a more complicated business. The technology that's used in your house, the technology in your yards, the technologies around your houses, it's no longer just manual labor. You really have to have a skilled workforce with the proper training in order for them to engage. So that's one. Another through Capital Crossroads is affordable housing. Really, and that doesn't mean low income housing. It's expensive, right? I mean, I feel so sorry that, families today, $700,000 a week for daycare and housing is not inexpensive. Anyone that has 1 or 2 kids and newly married, I mean, they're most likely both working because it's that expensive. Housing falls right in that same category. and interest rates going from 6.75 down to 5.75. It's a couple of $100 a month difference in your mortgage. It does matter, but we got to get interest rates back closer to 1% than 6%. It really makes that much more affordable. The second part of that is just housing demand. We went through a period of time there post-COVID. There's not a lot of speculative housing in any city around the country, and because of that, there's a high premium in demand. Laborers to build the houses, the electricians, the plumbers, the framers, the finish carpenters, all those jobs have got to be supported. Well, they need a place to live. They need a place to live that is a decent place to live. So I don't like the term low-income housing. Even affordable housing now is getting pasted with sort of a negative nomenclature around it. But we just need houses that people can afford, and that's another one. The Icon Water Trails, which I chair, that's another important project. People want to live in cities where they can do stuff. And just going down Court Avenue to a bar isn't going to get it done, right? You want to have things like the new water park that's being talked about here in West Des Moines. You want Adventureland there. But Icon Water Trails, do you realize the Des Moines River is the most fished water source in the entire state of Iowa? People go up and down along that river, and that's a really important. So we need clean water. We need places for people to drop a line in. We need a place for them to be able to park. We need a safe place for them to fish. And so when we're all done with the Fleur and Scott Avenue and Center Street Bridge projects, it'll be a really important project for the community. $109 million on our way to $135 million. And my guess is we'll have to spend about another $100 million in order to get it where we really need to get it done. But again, those long-term projects, they're the hard ones because you're out there asking for money, raising money to get that done. You're spending time on Capitol Hill with our members of both the House and the Senate. You're spending time with the county supervisors in the city of Des Moines. But all those things take time. It takes money. But those are the kinds of things I think will lead us to a better community that's going to attract talent. And the airport's also another one that I started off with.
I just love hearing you talk, Dan, about, you're talking about AI and you're at the end of your official working career, although I know you're probably more busy than me. But would you consider yourself like a lifelong learner? And if so, talk to me about how it's contributed to your success.
My lack of sleep is what's allowed me to be a good reader because I get up every day between 2 and 3. And even after retirement, I'm already sort of working by 3. I always get to the office long before 5. And I spend a lot of time in the mornings reading. When you have businesses in Asia, you sort of need to catch up from what happened overnight, and because that day's already started. So I do consider myself to be a lifelong learner. I joined 2 public company boards within the last 2 years. One is Arch Capital. You wouldn't know Arch, but they're twice our size. They're based out of Bermuda. They're an insurer, they're a reinsurer, and they're a mortgage protection company. Dynamic company, really do incredible work with AI, incredible work with predictive modeling, as the hurricane season has a profound impact on their financials, and there's a lot of storms, but the number of meteorologists on staff, they're advanced technology and models. So I'm not there just 4 times a year to sort of understand what's going on in the C-suite with capital deployment, CEO succession, and strategy. I really want to understand how that works. The other board is ADT, which is a home security company, one of the very largest companies out there. State-of-the-art stuff. I mean, the monitoring today with devices that can see movement and detection and know that it's a dog or know that it's a person. A little drone that sits on the top of the cabinet, and that drone, if there is glass breakage, it can fly anywhere in that house and identify where that glass breakage is, and then you got a visual on them, and you can speak to that person, or you could find a sick child, or if there were a smoke detector that was set off upstairs, the drone would go upstairs. It has lights on it. It has little infrared lights in the back, and that child could crawl down and follow that down the stairs and get out of the house. That's sort of like tip of the iceberg stuff on bio readers that they're using, but the technology that's out there that's coming. Right now it's an affordability thing, and you got to have really strong Wi-Fi in the houses to hold these things off. But that's what really jacks me up to stay engaged on the business side. I still advise Deanna. I'm there 1 day a week. I was there yesterday for most of the day. Still speak with her team, still do some mentoring with some of their senior execs. So that's what I do. But I read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. There's a number of industry trade rags that I pour through every day, and it's what I love to do. Sort of. Now it's a matter of retaining it all. Please.
All of that goes into a cycle though, because people don't want to have kids or they have no more kids because of the same idea of not having that much opportunity of work as in a economic basis with housing and like nursing later on in the year. So I feel like all of them have to work together to like make it more into appealing for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you know, the one thing about shortages and high prices, the best solution to high prices is high prices, because it causes you to consume differently, consume healthcare differently, consume everything differently. And so there is a full cycle, and it in many ways will correct itself. I think the stakes are higher because if you went back the last couple hundred years, the country's always grown. It's always been up and to the right with little small dips. But if you go back to 08 and 09, that was when people started making very different decisions on the size of their families. And because of that, next year, those are the kids that would have otherwise been coming into the workforce or going into college. And you see a demographic drop off that's happening. We're right on the cusp of that. We're right on the cusp of that 18, 19, 20-year-old. Now, those that do get an education or something, a skilled trade, I'll tell you what, they're going to be in high demand. They aren't going to have to worry, and you're going to pay up to put them on your teams. You know, hats off to Rob Denson at DMAC. I think he's done a magnificent job creating good programs with high-paying jobs, whether it's in culinary or automotive or truck driving, etc. Those are really important roles. You talk to Ben McLean at Ruan Trucking, and I was just with he and the governor and some visitors that were in from the Middle East Monday night for dinner, and one of their biggest challenges is getting a drug-free driver. Those are just like real issues, real problems today. And automated autonomous vehicles, no time in the near future, right? It's legal in 7 states, but there's all sorts of challenges to that long term. And so an over-the-road, long-haul trucker job is pretty safe the next 20 years. Please.
Was there an origination point, a flash point, a switch point for you in your life that sent you on probably what you felt was your life's calling or the direction that instigated that path for you?
Yeah, I think you kind of grow into it. Because as a child, you didn't certainly have that. I had some really interesting jobs growing up as a kid. I'll talk about 2 of them and then lead up to answering your question. I worked at the Astrodome in Houston in the food service area. And my job was the even-numbered suites, and suites are so much nicer than what they used to be. But when you under-ordered what you needed for your suite and your Brown and Root oil drilling, that CEO doesn't want to look like a fool. They got to call me to get the food that they didn't order. And literally, I would walk out of there, and no one wants to come out of pocket for tips. So if you're working at the Astrodome and you're helping them out, how do they tip you? And you're 18 years old, 17 years old. Bottles of booze. I had more booze in the trunk of my car that I would sell from the Astrodome. I mean, that was sort of how I cut my teeth. The other one was my senior year of high school. Our shop teacher, Wayne Baker, was killed in a tragic truck accident. And the school went to my parents. And I taught for half a year shop class, 3 periods a day, every day. And sort of got a really early taste of being responsible for people. I mean, these are my peers. And today I'm sure that wouldn't work in any school district, but in 1980, it was okay. And Dick Prey, who was an executive here in Des Moines, who I went to work for years ago in 1990, April, he was a big supporter of United Way. And I would say that was my first experience because it was United Way offsite where we went to a women's shelter in the southern part of Des Moines. And you saw these homeless kids with their homeless mother because there was an abusive situation at home. And I listened to these women describe just a horrific scene for them and what they were dealing with in these abusive relationships. And they're homeless with kids. And that was probably the first time I really got knee deep. At the Astrodome, I worked with a lot of people, Hispanic and Black and African American, who also came from a tough part of town. So I think getting exposure early on, my school was about a third Black, white, and a third Hispanic in Houston. And so I had a pretty healthy dose of diversity and seeing a group of, a cohort of our community that was needing help. And that probably influenced me as much as anything. And Joni and I do support Health and Human Services. We're not going to buy an art museum. We're not going to buy expensive art. That's not our deal. But we don't build stadiums. But we do feel strongly about investing in the community. I'd probably have Amanda as one of my best friends to understand how they operate. I think there's going to be huge demand for financial advisors, and they are retiring. But financial advisors are kind of a unique beast. They work longer than normal. And what's probably changed most about financial advisors, before they were very independent, and now they've created teams. And the Morgan Stanleys and the UBSs and B of A Merrill Lynch, they understand that advisor has limitations. They don't understand everything there is to understand about estate planning. They don't understand the tax code. They're not even really great at picking investments. And so the house is what is in large part helping support them with teams that can deal with estate planning and deal with survivorship issues and even life insurance that's used to help in buy-sell agreements and key person insurance. And so I think the advisor role is going to be less technical and more around relationship. And there's so many of those advisors that were stock jockeys that want to get you into this stock or this bond. And I think those days are sort of gone. Now the question is, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your income? What you're willing to sacrifice to get there? Because the vast majority of people who end up in retirement who are not financially well off, it wasn't a lack of income. It was overspending. People have gone out of their frickin' mind in spending disproportionately their incomes on things they don't need, period. And I do get on my high horse on this one because I just don't believe people with limited means should drink $2 $5 coffees a day. That's money that is well invested in your 401k plan or some form of after-tax savings. So I've said for years, and I've spoken on Capitol Hill, I've spoken on this around the world, we've got a spending problem as much as we've got a savings problem relative to financial security. And so I think the role of the advisor, very, very important. I wouldn't bet my money that the number of advisors will go down. It's actually stayed pretty stable for the last 30 years, and there will be retirements. But I think with the help of AI and teams, we're going to have more than enough capacity. The other area relative to capacity are people who want to convert lump sums into lifetime income streams. Because anyone who's invested in the market the last 10 or 15 years, it's been great, right? I mean, it's been up and to the right with these little small dips along the way. But the predictive models today would tell you in the next 10 to 20 years that a lot of equities it's not a very positive outlook relative to domestic equities. The smarter money seems to be in European and international funds as well as hard assets, could be commercial real estate, warehousing, things of this nature. But if they don't overly manipulate interest rates, I think actually interest rates unmanipulated could be a pretty high source of guaranteed income for people or steady income. Back to the original point, people who do want to take lump sums, like I've got it, I need to lock it in or at least half of it, the balance sheets it's going to take to back that up is going to be measured in trillions of dollars. It really will, but it's out there. And so that's why you've seen private equity move into the guaranteed income areas. A lot of pension plans are still out there, large pension plans, GM, Ford, Principal. These assets are set aside, and the time in which it's going to get drawn down is the next 20 to 30 years, 40 years. So, and I've spoken to this on so many occasions. 20 years ago, it was the demise of the defined benefit plan. All those assets would be gone. No, they're not. They're there today, and they're continuing to grow because the liability grows because we're living longer.
Would you say that annuity insurance is the best vehicle for the income stream here?
Is a former licensed, I wouldn't ever touch that question because every single person's unique. And that's where sitting down with a financial advisor who doesn't have an agenda about driving commissions, but's more interested in understanding what are their current financial condition, what's their future look like, what's their risk appetite, having an investment policy statement that they can lock into that's basically going to fill the buckets for college education, buying a house, buying a car, living needs, long-term care, all those issues. That's the role of the advisor. It's not to be a stock jockey to try to pick these things out. And for people who are choosing lifetime income that's guaranteed, it's important to get the right company, right? You want someone who's going to be around long-term.
1 o'clock, y'all.
Oh.
I want to make sure. I know.
Where are you guys out already, huh?
I
We haven't done world peace. We haven't done world hunger.